Part 45. The poisonous snake was pulled out. Mother, the emperor. The emperor went to the cold palace in the evening, and now I haven't seen it yet. Huang Li lowered her head and whispered to Li Qingyu, while secretly looking at the straight master who was sitting, speculating in her heart about the other party's joy and anger. With a bang, Li Qingyu's face was still expressionless, but the needlework and books on the small Kong table were swept down together. Huang Li was frightened, and hurriedly stepped forward to comfort. Mother is angry. Get out! But she only heard the master roar angrily. And Huang Li didn't dare to resist the wind at this time, so she glanced at Li Qingyu with some concern, and had to retreat. Even the Queen Mother and the Crown Prince are not with you, your emperor. You really have a deep love for concubine Wen. It's a pity that he doesn't have a few years to live. As long as he dies, won't the emperor be heartbroken? Hee. There is no longer a better day of envy of mandarin ducks and not immortals. Before the muttering words fell, she heard the sound of someone running outside the door. Li Qingyu was in a terrible mood. Hearing this voice, she couldn't help but be furious, and stood up and was about to order someone to drag this bold slave out and kill him with a cane, when she saw that the person had already broken in, and it was Huang Li who had just left. What's wrong? Li Qingyu frowned in disgust. She likes to be in control of everything. And she really hates Huang Li's panicked appearance. Mother, bad. There was news just now from outside the palace. Imperial Physician's son. Imperial Physician's son has been arrested by Chen Yiwei. And he is in Chen Yiwei's prison at this time, and he doesn't know what the situation is. What? Li Qingyu was taken aback, but even though she returned to her normal complexion, she said in a deep voice, "What is going on? Make it clear." I don't know the specific thing about this slave maid, but our informant only got the news. Mother, this. What should I do now? What's the panic? Sun Shi will definitely not betray me. Li Qingyu seemed to have great confidence in Sun Shi, but soon, a trace of confusion appeared in her eyes. And she secretly said in her heart, "Won't you really betray me?" In the Chen Yiwei prison, can the unforgettable former love affair withstand those torture instruments? If it were me, I would never resist such a relationship. Can he? The more she thought about it, the more panicked she became, but Li Qingyu refused to let Huang Li see that she was distracted at this time. So she reluctantly straightened her complexion, waved her hand and said, "Okay, I know about this. You let people stare at Chen Yiwei's side. If there is any new news, come and report it to me as soon as possible. Now you go out first, and let me be quiet." Huang Li heard what her master said, and in desperation, she had to go out and make arrangements. The exquisite dormitory suddenly became empty, and Li Qingyu finally couldn't control the panic in her heart, and sat on the Kong bed. How so? How so? How could something go wrong with a plan that was supposed to be seamless? How could it be found on his head so quickly? What went wrong? No, it's impossible. Even the queen didn't notice it that day. And now that concubine Wen is in the cold palace, how can he know all this? Could it be the emperor? No, even the emperor can't detect this. Damn it. What went wrong? Li Qingyu muttered frantically. Her voice was so fast that she couldn't hear what she was muttering. However, it was precisely because of this that she could show that she was completely flustered, so much so that she didn't even know that a little palace maid came over and quietly cut the candles. Looks like someone came in just now? After a long while, Li Qingyu looked up blankly, but saw that there was no one in the house. She frowned, and had the intention to let Huang Li in. But remembering the two bad news she brought, her mind was chaotic, because she stretched out her hand and waved, and muttered, "I want to be quiet, quiet. I don't know how long I sat like this." Li Qingyu was about to fall asleep unconsciously. At this moment, she felt a cold wind blowing outside, and she woke up with a spirit, and when she looked up, she saw the entire empty dormitory. The feeling of the wind in the bones seems to be still there. Li Qingyu was inexplicably scared, wrapped her arms around her body, and hurriedly shouted, "Someone, someone." There was a bang, as if it was the sound of the door of the dormitory being opened. It should be the Huang Li who came in. Li Qingyu put her mind at ease, rubbed her forehead, and thought that she didn't know if the emperor had come out of the cold palace at this time. It was impossible for him to accompany concubine Wen until now, right? While thinking about it, but Huang Li was never seen. Li Qingyu was panicked and angry, and hurriedly shouted, "Huang Li, what are you doing outside when you die? Don't let you get in yet. Is my sister calling Huang Li? She's sleeping soundly." A gentle voice came slowly, although it was soft, but somehow, Li Qingyu suddenly shivered twice. And the person was so frightened that she stood up all of a sudden. It's just because she is so familiar with this voice, but she hasn't heard it for half a year. So she won't forget it behind her ears. "Yes. Who is it?" she asked with a trembling voice, and the next moment, a woman dressed in white and with loose hair gently floated in. Looking at her with a mouthful of white teeth and a smile, "Sister, do you remember this palace? I'm underground, waiting for you so hard, God is pitiful. Finally let me wait for you." The emperor, queen. Li Qingyu was almost so frightened that she fainted, looked at the queen, who was getting closer and closer in horror, and suddenly screamed, "Someone, someone. Come on, people. Sister, don't bother. You all know that I'm a ghost now. I came to see you. How can I let the people around you know? If you don't believe it, just shout and see if anyone will come to your rescue." "You. What are you doing? You're all ghosts, why are you still coming to me? You should stay in the netherworld and wait for reincarnation. What are you doing with me?" Li Qingyu collapsed and shouted. She had finally been a favorite concubine for several years. Although she was scared to death at the moment, she was still a little sensible. "What did I come to you for? Hee, of course it's a reckoning. The account between us. I didn't have time to settle it with you when I was alive, and now that I'm dead, Lord Yama has pity on me and died unjustly. So he specially asked me to come to you to ask for my life on today's Shengyuan festival. Sister, you hurt me so much. If it weren't for the folk physician recommended by Qingyun, I really wouldn't even know how I died. You are so clever." No. Li Qingyu wanted to refute, but since she was the queen's ghost, she knew that no matter how she refuted, she could only wave her hands desperately, and she wanted to find a corner to lean over, but unfortunately because she was too panicked, she tripped over her skirt and fell down. Don't come. Sitting on the ground and desperately retreating back, Li Qingyu, who had always been graceful and gorgeous, was embarrassed at this time. However, the ghost on the opposite side was unmoved, and continued to step forward step by step, while asking coldly, "Why do you want to harm me? I'm just a queen in name only, why do you want to hurt me? Why? Why?" Li Qingyu muttered and repeated these 3 words, and the fire of jealousy in her heart that had been extinguished because of the queen's death suddenly jumped up again. At this moment, she even forgot her fear, and suddenly stood up and said in a loud voice, "Why? Just because you're the queen. It turns out that you also know that you are not worthy of your name. That is, you should abdicate and make way for others. Why is it that the emperor favors me, but I can only be a concubine, and you have no power to serve at all? But you want to occupy the status of the queen? Why do I have to kneel down every time I see you? Why should you fall out of favor and your family be prosperous because of you? I'm not convinced. What is this harem? Don't you know? But you still want to dominate the queen's position. This is what you asked for. All of it was you who asked for it. Even if I don't harm you, there are others who will calculate your position, who made you the queen. It's so unreasonable for you to blame me now. No wonder, I see. It's because I occupy the position of queen. So you can't even bear such a false name. The queen nodded, but the words she said were as cold as a knife. So, even if concubine Wen goes to the cold palace, you won't let him go. Right? That's right. Li Qingyu probably said it too happily just now, and she didn't notice the strangeness of this matter at all, but still laughed and said, Concubine Wen went to the cold palace. That was the opportunity I gave him. If I hadn't intercepted that letter and dedicated it to the emperor that day, how could there be their current conflict? I hate that the emperor has sent him to the cold palace, but he still can't forget it. If I don't take this opportunity to start early, how will I have a chance in the future? So, you asked Sun Shi to buy off the people in the cold palace, and sprinkled the water used by the wind and cold patients on the firewood, so that concubine Wen was sick. Sure enough, concubine Wen was sick, and Lu Hongdao and Zhang Tianhai were not there, so Sun Shi got his wish to help him diagnose the disease, and unconsciously moved his hands and feet on the medicinal materials. As long as that kind of thing was planted in concubine Wen's body, in the future, concubine Wen's diet will be infringed on the body as long as it is oily, and in the end, it will be the same as me, silently, without revealing flaws. Isn't it? That's right. Li Qingyu looked at the queen. Hee, sure enough, now that you are a ghost, you have seen through everything. The queen, you say. Will I let concubine Wen be your companion? She told and laughed, completely forgetting what she was afraid of, and her smile was full of madness and resentment. You're crazy. Is it okay not to do evil by hearing about the sky, but not to live if you do evil by yourself? Do you think that if you succeed in murdering the queen, you will be able to repeat the old tricks? As everyone knows, the most effective strategy can only be done once. The queen shook her head slightly. Sun Shi has been arrested and taken to Chunyiwei. Do you think you can hide everything you have done to hide from the emperor? So what? He won't give me an account. Li Qingyu sneered. If it's not the person I trust the most, how can I entrust this kind of thing to him? Queen, don't waste your efforts. It's impossible to confess to me, and in the end, this matter can only be settled. Are you so sure? Who do you think you are? Sun Shi committed such a heinous crime. If he confessed to being the mastermind behind the scenes, he might be able to save his family's life. But if he took all the blame on himself, he didn't want to live? Humph! You don't understand. When he saw me for the first time in the palace, he was confused. Otherwise, why do you think he didn't get married? There is only one old mother in his family, and he is guilty of the crime. At most, the mother and son will die together. Ha. The emperor would never have imagined that he didn't take me seriously, but there were still other men who regarded me as a treasure. Ha. Queen, even you haven't had this kind of experience. Right? You don't need to do anything. Just a word and a thing. You can coax other men to go to the soup for you. And you will never give up. Ha. Li Qingyu laughed and screamed. And in the end, she turned in circles unscrupulously in front of the queen, as if she had become the empress above 10,000 people, and the queen looked at her blankly, not knowing how to continue. It was at this time that she heard the chaotic footsteps outside, so she hurriedly retreated to the side, and saw Xia Linxuan and Xiao Beiji who walked in first. So she knelt down and said, "The slave has seen the emperor." "Your Majesty?" Li Qingyu, who was crazy, suddenly stopped all her movements, as if she had woken up from a sweet dream. She looked at Xia Linxuan in horror, and even forgot to kneel down to worship. Good means, good intentions. Sun Shi, that bastard. was so dazzled by a femme fatale like you that he was dazed. Xia Linxuan looked at Li Qingyu coldly, his eyes full of disgust and coldness. What's going on? The emperor. The concubines are wronged, and the concubines don't know what's going on. The emperor. Li Qingyu's mind was still a little drowsy, but she knew that this was her last chance. And if she didn't grasp it, the consequences would. She shuddered, not daring to think about it any further. So, she knelt down all of a sudden, dragging the hem of Xia Linxuan's dragon robe and exchanged with tears. The emperor spares my life. You listen to the concubine's explanation. What else to listen to? I had already heard your explanation clearly outside just now. Xia Linxuan was too lazy to entangle with Li Qingyu. He only had one thought in his heart now. The poisonous snake was pulled out, and Qiutai could finally return to the Yunhai Palace. The emperor. Behind him was Li Qingyu's miserable and desperate scream, so Xia Linxuan stopped and said in a deep voice without looking back, Concubine Yan is vicious, first murdered the queen, and then attempted to murder concubine Wen, which can be described as a great crime. The Li family had no way to teach their daughters, so they took back their titles, and the family had officials and degraded officials to the people. And Li Chunming was exiled to Liaodong. Xiao Beiji hurriedly wrote it down, knowing that this was the emperor's punishment of the Li family, and deliberately said that in front of Li Qingyu. It was probably to let her taste the pain of the conspiracy to expose the whole family. Li Chunming is Li Qingyu's father, who was originally a high-powered duke of Rong country, but now not only is his family demoted to the people, but he is also going to be exiled to Liaodong, which can be said to have fallen from the clouds to the abyss in one day. After repeating it again, seeing Xia Linxuan nodding, he hurriedly followed. The door of the hall behind him slowly closed, closing Li Qingyu's mournful cry inside. The emperor said that the inside and outside of this Ningxiang palace should be strictly investigated. It's up to you to do this. He was left by Xia Linxuan to deal with the aftermath. Xiao Beiji stood on the steps, commanded in high spirits, and suddenly pointed to one of the little palace maids and said, "That little girl is very good. When I am looking for candidates, only she dares to come forward." And then she took advantage of the candle-cutting flowers to scatter the psychedelic in the candle, so that the truth will be revealed. She is very good. From today on, transfer her to the Heart Cultivation Palace, and after finding out the innocence of her net worth, she will stay in the Heart Cultivation Palace to listen to it. The little palace maid was simply overjoyed. At that time, Xia Linxuan broke in with a group of people, and in less than a blink of an eye, all the eunuchs and palace maids outside the Ningxiang Palace were all controlled. And at that time she knew that this Ningxiang Palace was about to change the sky. Sure enough, after that, I heard concubine Yan's miserable cry. The little palace maid was beating the drum in her heart, but she didn't know that after she volunteered to help for self-preservation, she would be blessed by misfortune and get such benefits. At the moment, everyone's eyes were looking at her with jealousy and envy, and there were naturally resentful and unwilling eyes, but these were no longer important to the little palace maid. When she arrived at the emperor's side, it was equivalent to having a layer of protective umbrella, and these people in the Ningxiang Palace, whether it was the eunuch Zhou Yongli or the palace maid Huang Li, those who had to tremble and laugh and talk with them in the past, would never be able to harm her again. The matter of the Ningxiang Palace was like a thunderbolt, and before others noticed it, the master and slave here had been imprisoned overnight. And Xia Linxuan, the ruthless emperor, naturally would not feel sorry for his former favorite concubine. All he was thinking about at this time was Pu Qiutai in the cold palace.